Hello there, folks, and welcome to the program. My name is John Feeks. I'm the lead pastor of New Life Sanctuary Church in Winnipeg. And this is the third video in our series on this very touchy, very thorny and controversial social issue called abortion. And in the first video, we looked at the science. We looked at what exactly was being destroyed when an abortion is being performed. And I think if you watch that video, you're going to have to agree that an abortion involves the direct and intentional killing, the destroying of an innocent human life, a little person, an unborn person. In the second video, the one previous to this one, we were looking at some of the most common arguments for abortion, for a woman's so-called right to destroy her unborn offspring. And in this video, we want to continue looking at these most common arguments for abortion. And I'm trying to show you that logically, rationally, morally, these arguments really don't work. They may sound good on the surface, some of them, but really they just don't go through. And in fact, if they did go through, if these arguments were good arguments for, if they really did justify destroying innocent human life in the womb, then you could use those same arguments to justify killing anybody out there in the world walking around right now. And that would just be a nightmare world if we were consistent with that kind of thinking. But as we enter into this video, I just want to start us off with God's Word, the Bible. And I'm reading now from Proverbs 31. And here we have an instruction, an imperative to God's people. And I say this is an imperative that everybody should be trying to live up to. It says here in Proverbs 31, verse 8, "Open your mouth for the speechless in the cause of all who are appointed to die. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy." And that's what we're trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do in these simple videos. You can see the production value behind these videos, not very great, but I do think that the information you're getting is priceless. I think that this is good information, good argumentation that you are supposed to now take and put to good use in the defense of innocent human life, okay? So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to honor God and be a blessing to others, and we're trying to protect innocent human life. So with that, I just want to jump right into the program. And I want to pick it up exactly where we left off in the last program. Now, one of the most common arguments that I've heard for abortion is this idea that, well, nature aborts babies all the time. There are spontaneous miscarriages where for some reason, maybe we never find out what the reason is, but for some natural reason, a mother's body just aborts the child. And there are many instances of miscarriage, especially in third world countries. And so this is supposed to be some kind of argument that it's okay for us to intentionally go in and destroy a woman's unborn offspring. Well, look, just because nature may spontaneously abort a baby, how in the world does this justify our deliberately going in and taking out an innocent human life? I mean, the fact of the matter is, all humans eventually die. The Bible calls this the way of all the earth. All humans eventually are going to experience physical death. Our bodies are going to become defunct. Now, does that justify us going out and destroying another innocent human life? Just because that person is going to die one day, does that mean you can go kill them today? And I think we can see the fallacy there. I mean, the absolute illogic in this, and the immorality behind it too. It really would turn our world into a nightmare world. I don't think you can justify destroying an innocent human life in the womb just because sometimes babies die in the womb. Okay, and I won't beat a dead horse with that one. Another common argument comes by way of analogy or a parable. We are sometimes asked to imagine that we are maybe in some laboratory, research lab, we'll say, and in that lab we have some frozen embryos. We have babies who are maybe just a few days along, and they've been frozen, cryogenic sleep. And all of a sudden, a fire breaks out in the laboratory, and we have to choose. Let's say we have to get out now, and you have to choose. Are you going to rescue these frozen embryos, or are you going to rescue the toddlers that happen to be there that day? Maybe there's a couple toddlers. Maybe their parents brought them in. Who knows? But most of us, our moral intuitions on this would say, grab the toddlers, and you'd have to leave the frozen embryos behind to be consumed in the fire. Now, I'd like to ask a question. How does saving one life over another prove that one of them isn't human? That just doesn't follow. We're talking about who we're going to choose to save here. We're not talking about who we're intentionally going to destroy or deliberately kill. And that is what abortion is. Abortion is not just withholding life support. Abortion involves direct and intentional killing. So the whole research lab parable, it's not really analogous to the abortion issue at all, is it? And friends, our moral intuitions may be helpful, but they're not infallible, really, are they? There was a time when people thought that black people were of less value than white people, especially those who were indoctrinated in the whole evolutionary story as given by Darwin himself and his colleagues. They thought that people with darker skin were not as highly evolved, therefore not as valuable as a person with light color skin, and that became their moral intuitions. But of course, that's not true. That's not true at all. And so we're just saying that just because your moral intuition may be helpful sometimes, they're not infallible guides to what is moral or ethical. And so because we want to, I think most of us would rescue the toddler, and we would have to, therefore, leave the frozen embryos to be consumed, that in no way proves that those embryos are not valuable, and it certainly doesn't prove that they're not human. So now another argument that we sometimes get is that unborn babies have no conscious desire to live, and therefore it's quite all right to destroy them. Well, again, can you really maintain that? Is that something, if you gave it deeper reflection, does it really sound rational and moral to you just because a person doesn't have a conscious desire to live? First of all, a lot of the people, can we just be honest here, who promote abortion on demand, they are on the social political left, and they promote things like global warming, and now it's climate change. It's a much more ambiguous term, isn't it? Climate change. So now we can push any political agenda we want because we're trying to fight climate change and so on. And when you stand against those kinds of things, or when you simply ask a question, you are told that you are a science denier. We're supposed to let science speak to us on these issues. Well, the science has spoken on the issue of abortion, and I've shown in the first video that the unborn scientifically are human beings. They're unborn persons. The science has weighed in on that one decisively. And furthermore, there is no scientific way you're going to prove that the unborn child has no conscious desire to live. How would you set about proving that scientifically? Is that something you've observed? You've observed scientifically, empirically, experimentally, that a baby in the womb has no conscious desire to live? You've never shown that. No one's ever shown that. In fact, in the first video, I showed how, according to the Scientific American, they're reporting on scientific now research peering into the womb, looking at brain states in newborn babies and so on, looking at neural firing patterns and so on. What we're seeing there in the brains of newborn babies looks like neural firing patterns associated with conscious activity. And one of those articles goes on to say that twins in the womb, they actually interact with each other and their movements are planned. So at a certain stage, very clearly, babies seem to be aware of their surroundings, and there does seem to be some sort of conscious desire. There does seem to be some kind of intentionality there. And I'm not saying that's what makes them valuable, that's what makes them worthy of our protection, but I am saying that to deny any conscious desire in the minds of the unborn is not really listening to the science after all. But a bigger issue here, why must it be that conscious desire determines the value of a human life or its right to life? Why would that be? That's arbitrary. When a person goes to sleep, is that okay to kill them in their sleep because they don't have any conscious desire to be alive? They're just sort of checked out for a little while. Or a person in a coma, can you just destroy someone in a coma? And I've talked to people who promote abortion, people who want to defend the woman's so-called right to destroy her offspring, and I will offer that. I'll say, is it okay to kill somebody unconscious? And their response to me every single time is, well, that person's going to wake up. And my response to that is, well, if you leave the baby alone, that baby also will have a conscious desire to live if you just let the baby develop normally. So what's the difference? There is no difference. There is no great difference here. And just because a baby in the womb may or may not have a conscious desire to live, let's say they don't have a conscious desire to live, does that mean that they're not entitled to the human right to life? I mean, you think about in the days of the slave trade, a slave may have been so bludgeoned that he has given up recognizing his right to freedom. He may not recognize anymore that he has a right to be a free person, but does that mean he's not entitled to be free just because he's not consciously aware of that right to freedom? Well, of course not. I mean, that's silly. So you see, all I'm trying to get at here is any argument you put forward to defend your view that the unborn can be destroyed, I can take that same argument and I can use it to justify killing anybody in the world today. And that's a very dangerous philosophy, I think. Now think about, here's a thought experiment that might be instructive and helpful. We would have to ask the question, is it okay to genetically modify people so that they never have a conscious desire to live? I mean, remember the argument here. The baby doesn't have a conscious desire to live, therefore you can destroy that baby before that desire develops. And so the question is it okay to genetically modify children so that they never have a conscious desire to live? And I think most of us who are morally sensitive, I think most of us would agree that it is not permissible. You may not prevent the development of normal desires in people. I mean, it would be morally abhorrent. I think it would be terrible, I think most of us would agree, to genetically modify people so that they become mindless servants of ours. That you have actual human beings, but they've been modified genetically so that they never think for themselves. They have no independent thought or opinion. They just do what we tell them. We just order them around. And sometimes I think our leftist government is trying to convert the whole population into that kind of person. But in any case, I think that we would all agree that that would be wrong to do that. Well, if it's wrong to prevent the development of normal desires, then certainly it's wrong to abort a child, which prevents all development. I mean, that's it. When you do an abortion, you destroy everything, and the baby's just eliminated from the earth. And so I think, again, if you think deeply about these issues, I think you would see that no argument for abortion is really rational. It's not moral. It doesn't go through. And if we applied those logically and consistently, those philosophies, they would turn our planet into a nightmare world. I think about people who have sustained brain injuries. Okay, what if you took a 2x4 to the head on the job site or something fell on your head, and all of a sudden you had a brain injury, and you didn't have any conscious desire to live. Now, are we saying that it's okay to destroy a person like that? Is because they all of a sudden, because of the brain injury, they don't have a conscious desire to live anymore? Should we not help these people to develop new desires? Should we not encourage healing of the brain, promote restoration to normal thought and function? Well, I think most of us would say yes. Our healthcare system is supposed to help these people to heal up, return them to as normal a state of life as possible, the most normal condition possible, and let them develop new desires naturally, normally, help promote that. But I think most of us would say it would be wrong to destroy them before those new desires develop or are restored. Again, you can see the analogy here. Why is it okay now to go into the womb and destroy a baby before any desires have developed? I don't see any great difference here, okay? One argument that I hear often is this attached to a stranger so-called analogy. In this thought experiment, you're supposed to imagine that the woman is nothing more than some kind of life support system for the baby, and she should not be obligated at law to provide life support for that child. And in the analogy, you're supposed to imagine that one day you wake up, and lo and behold, there you are, you're attached medically to some stranger, and your body is now the life support system for this stranger, and that stranger is going to be needing you to keep them alive for 9 months. And we all agree that there's something wrong with the idea that our government could legislate an obligation on you, that you would have to remain attached to that perfect stranger to keep them alive. And so this is supposed to prove now that the woman has a right to withdraw life support for that child that's in her womb, that developing unborn child. Well, this is a false analogy. It really is, we're dealing with apples and oranges here, okay? That baby inside the mother is not a stranger. That baby inside the mother is her own offspring, okay? It's not an intruder. I mean, in the thought experiment, all of a sudden you wake up and there's this person you've never met in your life, maybe in your home, maybe lying on a bed next to you or something. I mean, that's an intruder. But in this, in the case of the woman who's pregnant, the baby's not an intruder. The unborn baby is in her womb. That's exactly where the baby belongs, in her womb. And when you perform an abortion, you're not just withdrawing life support from that baby, you're destroying that baby. So in the analogy, in the thought experiment, it wouldn't be that you just detach yourself from the stranger who's attached to you for life support. It would be more like putting a bullet in his head. And you can see, I mean, these things are totally different. Oftentimes, they'll go overboard with the analogy, and they'll have the woman bedridden in the story. She can't go anywhere. She's attached to this stranger that's suddenly showed up in her life and all this and that. Look, in a normal human pregnancy, a woman is not bedridden. She can do pretty much everything that she could do before she was pregnant. There are exceptions. I mean, you shouldn't be smoking and you shouldn't be taking alcohol or drugs. And there are some things that are harmful to the baby. But for the most part, pregnant women lead normal, happy, healthy lives. A bit of morning sickness here and there, that's true. No one's saying this is a picnic. But it's not the same as being, I mean, strapped down to a bed for 9 months and you can't go anywhere. And that is not an accurate analogy to a normal human pregnancy at all. One argument I hear often is that, well, if you had a child, let's say your child is 4, 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, who knows what, and all of a sudden your child needed a kidney or something, or needed an organ, or maybe your child's even older, maybe your child's 13, 14, 15 years old. Let's say they needed a kidney. Let's say you were a match. You could donate a kidney to your own child. The moral thing to do would be to donate that kidney if you're a healthy person, but there's no law in place that would force you to do that. You wouldn't have to donate a kidney to your needy child. And so you could legally keep your kidney and let the child die. And they want to say, well, that's analogous to the pregnant woman. If the woman is not obligated at law to give an organ to keep her offspring alive, why is she obligated to use her womb to keep the child alive? And again, this is a false analogy here. It does not go through, okay? The woman's organs in her body, her kidneys, her heart, lungs, those organs are in place to keep her body alive. So obviously she doesn't have to donate one of her organs to keep another human being alive, even if it is her offspring. However, her uterus is not in her to keep her alive. The uterus, I mean, they can remove her uterus and the woman will survive just fine. Lots of women have their uteruses taken out. The uterus is designed to keep that baby alive. See, it's a different thing going on here entirely, okay? And so I think that's pretty important to think about these things. Now, I just want to discuss now embryonic development for just a second here. I'd like to discuss embryonic development. A lot of people have this misguided idea that a baby is sort of put together in the womb piece by piece, like a car on an assembly line. You know, the chassis put together and various components on the wheels and the engine and the drivetrain and all this other stuff. Those things are all assembled piece by piece, and then the car is put together, and at the end of the assembly line, now you have a car. At long last, we have a car, but before the end of the assembly line, you didn't have a car. You just had parts in various stages of development. That's not the same as how a baby develops in the womb. A baby is a baby from the moment of conception, okay? The development of an unborn child, it's from within. The baby directs its own growth and maturation based on its genetic code. And this whole thing entails a sort of continuity of being. Okay, and a good analogy here that I've heard, and a lot of pro-lifers will use this analogy, so I'm going to use it as well. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. I think I got this one from Scott Klusendorf. I know Stephanie Gray uses similar arguments, but back in the olden days, there was a thing called a Polaroid camera. I don't know how many people remember Polaroid cameras, but you would snap a picture with your Polaroid camera, and out the front of the camera, this little film would pop out, and you'd walk around waving this thing in the air for about 60 seconds or so. And on that film, you would slowly see an image developing. And we would say, Scott Klusendorf uses this analogy. He says, supposing you were out on a safari and you snapped a picture of a leopard or some exotic cat. Wonderful pictures, a picture of a lifetime. You snapped it with your Polaroid camera. And all of a sudden, while you're waiting for that film to develop into an image, someone snatches that film out of your hand and throws it in the water or tears it up or throws it in the fire or something. And you'd be pretty ticked off. You'd say, hey, you destroyed that beautiful picture of a leopard I just took. I think Stephanie Gray uses the Loch Ness Monster. She says, supposing you use a Polaroid camera and you snapped a picture of the Loch Ness Monster. He had his head out of the water. And while the film was developing, someone took it out of your hands and threw it in the water or something, or into the fire. You'd be really mad. You'd say, you just destroyed that picture I took. And yet, what they destroyed was not the end result. It was not the clear picture that you were waiting for. It was at a various stage of development. But you are right to say they destroyed your picture. Okay, and that is exactly what we're talking about with the unborn child. The unborn child is not put together piece by piece. That unborn child is a child from the moment of conception. And during those 9 months of developing, they're just at various stages in their development. They're not being put together piece by piece. And I have a lengthy quote here I'd like to share with you from Dr. Vieira, and he has a philosophical argument he'd like to put forward, and this is what he said. He said, the underlying premise in the arguments pro-abortionists give against fetal personhood is that non-persons can change into persons. They are saying that a living being can undergo a radical, essential change in its nature during its lifetime. But there is a logical problem here, says Dr. Vieira. If the change was biologically inevitable from conception given time, then this change is not a change in essential nature. This is because if the being naturally initiates the change, it must be in this nature from the beginning. It must be in its nature from the beginning to do so. If it's in its nature to do so, then despite any changes in such characteristics as independence, place of residence, physical development, or demonstration of mental ability, what the being is in later life is what the being is from the beginning of its life. This means that if we are persons with the right to be free from aggression later in life, we are persons even at conception. And I don't think I could say it any better than Dr. Vieira. And again, he's coming back to this fact that a child is a child from the moment of conception. And what you're seeing there is a development over time. Different attributes, capacities, abilities are coming into being within that tiny person. And we talked about that in the earlier video, that basically your entire life is one of both stasis or sameness and change. You stay you despite whatever physical changes are taking place in your body. And the physical changes are always taking place in your body. They never stop. You grow bigger and stronger and sharper mentally, intellectually, from childhood all the way up until I'm not sure what age. And then at a certain point, we start to go downhill, at least physically, and we start to maybe not recover as quick from illnesses, from injury. We may develop things like arthritis, who knows what. We may find it hard to see. We may need glasses. You may become hard of hearing, whatever the case. The point is, your entire life is one typified by changing physical states in your body. Your body's constantly changing. So you are what you are, despite whatever physical changes you may be experiencing, okay? This will be the last one I look at here today. Some people say, well, the sperm and the egg are both alive. Are we morally obligated to keep sperm and egg alive? They're living things, aren't they? And why is it okay for those things to be destroyed, but it's not okay to destroy a baby, say, days into conception, days after conception? Well, obviously, sperm and egg are parts of a human being. And their job, their role, the thing that they seem to be intended to do, and I'm slipping into teleological language here because it's really hard to think of a human being physically or any part of a human being physically and not bring in teleological language that sort of recognizes that the parts of a person are put here with intention. And that's, it's just an aside here, but the fact is we all treat our eyes as though they are here so that we can see. Our ears are here so that we can hear. We use our minds believing that our minds are here so that we can think, bring down true conclusions, and discover true things in the world, of course. But even parts of our body, we do see intentionality behind them. And sperm and egg seem to be here so that they can combine and bring a new human life into the world. But sperm and egg are not human lives. They come together, and a new human being comes into being at that point. And so that new human being, that's what has the right to be free from aggression. That new little human being ought to be protected from those who desire to destroy. So I'm just going to wrap up the program right there because we're coming up on a half an hour. But the next program, I'm going to pick it up right there. We're going to look at a few more common arguments for abortion, and I'll do my best once again to show you how they really don't go through. And if they did go through, if they were good arguments and they did justify destroying innocent human life, then you could logically, rationally, consistently, you could apply those arguments and justify destroying anybody out there in the world today. Okay, so, and we don't want to live in that kind of nightmare world. I mean, I don't, and I'm sure you don't either. All right, friends, thank you so much for tuning into this program and considering these very important issues with me. I just wish you every blessing. Take care, and we'll visit again soon. Okay, bye for now.